The Exorcism of Claire Devereaux, Chapter 14. Something wicked has come. The lilies were too sweet. Their perfume lay over the rooms like a warm cloth, dulling tongues and making kindness feel heavy. People handled their grief like fragile porcelain. Cups and condolences both set down softly, careful not to chip either one. Rachel moved through the parlor in a black dress that seemed to generate its own gravity. Marianne, her cousin, cheeks blotched from crying, sweater askew, slipped a warm cup into Rachel's hand. "Drink," Marianne whispered, eyes shining. "You haven't yet." "I will," Rachel promised, though the coffee smelled like standing water. Claire met her in the doorway between rooms, hat neat, smile pinned in place. "You're holding up," Claire murmured, voice upholstered in sympathy. Rachel started to answer and saw them, thin crescents of black, lodged under Claire's nails, a faint, dark sheen like fresh enamel across the heel of her palm. "You've got..." Rachel touched her own knuckles to show. "Banister scuff," Claire said too quickly, lifting a stack of programs to hide her hands. Small things look big today. The mantel had been curated into a kind of altar, framed photos and lilies braided with ribbon, clusters of candles that had already begun to tunnel. At the exact center, raised a little higher than everything else, sat the abstract carved figure, nicknamed Charlie, with smoothed features, mouth fixed in a patient, not smile. The nearby flames seemed to incline toward it, as if the air itself bent that way. "Claire, I thought we agreed to keep that in your room," Rachel asked. "Oh, come on. Look at Charlie. He deserves to celebrate your dad's life just like the rest of us." Claire's voice went soft, intimate. "He should be here," the front door whispered. John Sampson stepped in with a slick of mist on his jacket and the expression of a man who knew this choreography too well. He found Rachel's hand, firm, brief, and let his gaze do a slow circuit. The crowd. Rachel introduced John to Claire, and John shook her hand. In the moment, his eyes paused on Claire's fingertips, then came back to Rachel in a question. "That looks like fresh paint," John said gently. "Banister," Claire repeated. John let the word hang, as if waiting to see whether it would drip. Then, casual and exact, he asked, "Were you anywhere near the old church this morning?" The question slid through Rachel, like a dull fork against china. "No," Claire said lightly, not blinking. "Why would I be?" John didn't press. His eyes returned to the totem and stayed there a fraction too long for manners. He leaned toward Rachel, voice low. "Why is that here?" "Claire moved it," Rachel said. "She said he should be here." John's mouth pulled tight, not quite a frown. "But that thing is linked to every bad memory from your father's last days. I ask you once more, Rach. Why is this thing here?" Rachel smiled at John, then looked over towards Claire. "Noble John, always the protector. That's why Dad admired you." "John," Rachel muttered. "Just need to get through this and I swear I'll get rid of that thing," Rachel said. "Everything all right?" Claire asked brightly, arriving in their small circle with a smile that felt over-rehearsed. "All good," John said, face smooth again. The room's talk rose and fell like timid surf. Someone laughed too high and then clutched a cup with both hands to keep from shaking. Marianne slid back to Rachel's side, close enough that Rachel could feel the heat of her arm. "Claire," Rachel said, careful, "maybe we put it back where it was." A strange look comes over Claire's face. She stared at the television that was off, in a trance-like state. Claire tilted her head, "He's here," she said. The words arrived twice, first in Claire's voice, then half a breath later in a thin, late echo, as if the room itself had repeated her from behind the walls. The air cooled. Candle flames across the mantel shivered sideways together for one beat, like grass pressed flat by an invisible sleeve. A neighbor walked over towards the open window and I'd, "Must be a draft or something," and checked the latch twice to be sure. "Claire," Rachel tried, "let's sit."
"No, Piggy. I want to stand right here,"
Claire said, voice slightly altered, as if someone had moved a thumb over her windpipe. "Stand and listen." Without looking, she slipped the cup from Marianne's hand, took a small, indifferent sip, as if taste had left the world, and then inverted the cup over the nearest candle. The flame hissed and vanished beneath porcelain. A wreath of smoke wrote itself in the air and hung there like a question mark. "Claire, please, that's hot," Marianne said, reaching. Claire caught Marianne's wrist and held it over the extinguished candle, just close enough for heat to sting, close enough to make the nerves misbehave. Marianne tried to pull back. Claire didn't let her. The smile she wore could have been framed and sold with the caption "Good Neighbor." "You all came," Claire told the room, not looking at anyone she was speaking to. "You're all so kind." She released Marianne and stepped into the middle of the living room, near Charles, the neighbor and friend of the late Alex Lloyd. Claire, lifting 2 fingers and placing them on Charlie's forehead. "This," she murmured, eyes unfocused, "this stops." Charles stepped slowly back away from Claire with a confused look on his face. A little girl near the totem watched openly, the paper cup in her hands collapsing as she gripped it. Claire plucked the cup from the child, crushed it flat in one deliberate fist, and set it beside the child, as a means to make the child cry. A wicked smile came on Claire's face. She looked around the room at everyone in attendance. "And soon," Claire said, in a voice perfectly calm,
"You will all die."
She didn't raise her voice, didn't add a flourish. She said it the way a calendar notes a dentist appointment. Neutral, scheduled, unavoidable. The room's small sounds went still. The click of spoon to porcelain. The soft exhale of careful breath. Silence gathered itself tight and measured. "Claire," Janice, a family friend, tried gently whispered to Claire, "Are you okay, dear?" "Left side first," Claire told a man by the doorway, almost kind. She turned to a woman holding flowers, from the throat down. Then she leaned toward a guest she barely knew, and, impossibly, whispered in his exact voice,
"You won't make it to 70.
He reeled back, searching her face for his reflection and not finding it there. Rachel reached her. "Claire." She caught Claire's wrist with both hands. The skin was cool, like she'd been standing in a pocket of weather that belonged to another house. As their hands met, dark, viscous tears gathered at the corners of Claire's eyes and began to run. Thin, inky tracks that drew lines down her cheeks and along her jaw. A guest made a raw, unhelpful sound. Another crossed herself with a hand that shook visibly. Claire's lips shaped the word, "hold," like she liked how it felt in her mouth. One of the photographs on the mantel tilted itself by a degree, the movement so small Rachel would have missed it if she weren't staring at Claire's face and seeing everything else at once. John stepped between Claire and the child, a quiet, unobtrusive barrier, guided the girl sideways with a small nod toward her mother. He didn't touch the totem. He measured it with his eyes, the way you measure a live wire. Claire drifted toward the older man by the door and lifted his hand. placing it flat against his own chest, pressing once, firm, instructional, then letting it fall as if she'd set a timer and walked away. Something shifted, not in the room, but in Claire. Her pupils tightened, as if the light had found her at last. A small shudder passed through her, the kind a person gives when realizing they've been standing in the wrong story. She blinked and actually saw faces, the crushed cup on the mantel, the dark sheen on her own hands. Her voice came back at its natural pitch, smaller, ashamed. I don't know why I did that. Sense rushed in like water finding a drain. It's the day, someone said too quickly, relief galloping into the vacuum. Old houses, old spirits, nerves is all child. The murmur reassembled. People turned toward plates and cups like birds, returning to branches after wind. At the mantel for Alex, a candle guttered once and righted itself. A photograph of a happy Alex had tilted. Rachel wiped the dark tracks from Claire's face with her sleeve. The stain came away faintly, stubborn as soot. We're done, everyone, she told her guest, gentle and final. For today. John nodded with a concerned look on his face. Thank you for coming, Rachel told the room. Please get home safe. People obeyed and slowly said their goodbyes one by one. They approached in small processions. He was such a good man, stay strong, and pressed her arm with careful fingers as if she might break if touched any harder. Marianne squeezed Rachel once, hard, and whispered, "Call me if you need anything, Rachel." John steered the last few toward the door, all quiet competence, letting the mist take them into the soft dark outside. The house accepted their leaving with the long breath of a place that prefers fewer witnesses. When the rooms had thinned to furniture and flowers and the kettle's low complaint, Rachel guided Claire down the hallway. They passed through a stripe of cool air that still hung at shoulder height near the mantel. Like a tide line, the house hadn't decided to erase. Rachel didn't turn to check the candles. She knew how they burned now and what they would do if invited. John waited in the doorway, one hand resting lightly on the frame. "Be safe, Rachel," he said, glancing over at the totem. Rachel nodded. The house released the kind of quiet that comes after guests. The lilies, off duty at last, breathed their sweetness into the leftover space. Somewhere, a board settled. Somewhere, a clock considered 3 and decided against it. Rachel closed the bedroom door on Claire's breathing and stood with her hand on the knob, watching the faint shine on the backs of her own knuckles. A line had been crossed,